It's a historic moment, not just for Giorgia Meloni, but for Italy as a country. On Triple J.
Yeah, we love Italy. It's one of our favourite holiday destinations. Maybe you've been dreaming about a big bowl of pasta, beautiful wine, beaches, those cute little piano accordion players. I don't know, it's a very romantic picture, right? But the reality of living in Italy is a bit different. And Italy is making headlines this week for some big political news. They've just had an election and they've elected a far-right leader. Her name's Giorgia Meloni. She's pretty controversial and it's got a lot of people worried. There are warnings there could be big consequences for the LGBTQI community, for refugees, for abortion rights in Italy. I want to find out a bit more. Dr. Gabriele Abbondanza is a lecturer in international relations at the University of Sydney and he's with us now. G'day, Gabriele. Thanks for joining us on Hack.
Hi, Dave. Thank you for having me.
Italy's elected its first female Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni. Some are calling her a fascist. Is she a fascist?
Well, no, I wouldn't say that she is. It's, of course, quite usual to use headlines that attract people, but no, she's not a fascist. Her political party has old roots in the post-fascist political landscape of Italy. She is a somewhat traditional far-right politician, and the same goes for her political party, but really not a fascist at all.
I guess people have that idea because of some of the things maybe she's said or done in the past. Like in the past, she's praised Italy's former fascist leader, Benito Mussolini. He was one of Hitler's allies. She's been really outspoken against gay adoption, asylum seekers, those sorts of things. I'm wondering, how did she win this election?
Well, that is a good question. Long story short is that people in Italy have sought a different political scenario, a different political landscape for a number of years now. And this is why they have tried a populist party in the past, which is called Five Star Movement. Before that, they tried another far-right anti-immigration party called the League. But they all showed a lot of continuity with the previous policies that Italy witnessed. And so I suppose that this time they wanted to try the only major political party that has never been in power with its own prime minister, and that is Giorgia Meloni's own party.
Do we know how young people voted in Italy? Because in Italy, voting's not compulsory. So I'm wondering, was there a big turnout or was that part of the problem as well?
No, voting is not compulsory in Italy. It's quite a rare thing, in fact, that Australia has. And yes, we already know how young people voted. The majority of young people voted for the so-called third pole, so a sort of a small coalition of two centrist parties, so quite moderate and pro-EU, as well as centre-left, what we would call the Labour Party here in Australia. But Italy, like most European nations, is a country where a lot of, shall we say, more mature people live and vote. And this is why, in this case, a conservative party with a conservative coalition was able to get into power.
We have seen a lot of concern around the world about the future of LGBTQI rights in Italy, abortion rights. When it comes to migrants, issues around that as well. Do you think we're going to see big changes that might threaten human rights in Italy?
This is $1 billion question, of course. Now, it's a little known fact that both Italy and Australia adopt pretty much the very same policies when it comes to seaborne asylum seekers. So asylum seekers that try to reach either Australia or Italy via sea with a boat. The only thing is that whereas Australia implements these policies with South Pacific island nations, Italy implements them with Libya, which is on the other side of the Mediterranean Sea. And because Libya is ravaged by a civil war, which means that the government really doesn't have control of their own territory, then the policies that Rome implements are not, numerically speaking, that is, that successful in stemming these big numbers of asylum seekers via sea. So they are promising to put a stop to that and to adopt even harsher policies. But it's actually quite difficult to see how that would work because the Italian policies, like the Australian ones, they're very similar, are already really, really harsh. So it's hard to see how they can get even harsher. When it comes to anti-abortion, on the other hand, yes, that is a position that is quite popular with some of the most conservative voters in Italy, much like everywhere else in the world. But Giorgia Meloni, that is, has already promised not to change that. Gay rights, well, sexual minorities, for example, same-sex people cannot legally get married in Italy. They have civil relationships. And I don't think that Giorgia Meloni and her coalition will change anything, which means that same-sex people which want to actually get married in the traditional sense will have to wait for a subsequent government for that.
What does this result mean for the rest of Europe? Because I also saw that Italy's former Prime Minister, Silvio Berlusconi, has been re-elected to Parliament. He's like an ally, maybe you could even call him a mentor to Giorgia Meloni, and a good friend of the Russian President Vladimir Putin. Could we see Italy start getting closer to Russia?
That's another good question. Some of you might remember that Italy, with France, Germany, and the UK, the big European countries, Italy was one of the strongest supporters of Ukraine politically and one of the strongest opposers of Russia after Russia invaded Ukraine once again in 2022. So she has already promised, Giorgia Meloni, not to change that particular approach that Italy is now becoming quite well known for. It's difficult to see an increase in support for Ukraine, but Italy, under a government led by Giorgia Meloni, will not back from the support that it's been giving to Ukraine.
And what about for us here in Australia? Do you think, Gabriele, there's any impact for us, Italy having a new government?
Joe Biden, US president, has already warned the US people about not being too optimistic about the future because of what has happened with the Italian election. So let us remember that we are talking, Italy, about the 8th largest economy in the world, the 7th largest exporter on the planet. When it comes to Australia, the two countries have quite cordial, quite positive relations, which are getting deeper and deeper year by year. So while much will not change in terms of relations between Italy and Australia, we can only hope that this positive trend of getting closer diplomatically and politically speaking between the two countries will actually continue to go on, even with a far-right government with Giorgia Meloni at the head of the coalition. That is, of course, what we all hope.
There's definitely going to be a lot more commentary around this. We'll be keeping track of it. Dr. Gabriele Abbondanza from the University of Sydney, thank you very much for your time.
Oh, it's been fantastic. Thank you very much for having me.
Hack on Triple J.